We will get started in just a second here. So we're up and running in just a second. We're actually right on time, it looks like. So that's a wonderful thing for a change. Hopefully my audio is good for everybody. If it's not, you will let me know. I would appreciate it. We're going to be joined by Jeff Smith and by Bob Dunn and a whole bunch of other people here momentarily. So we will get started here and get rolling. Audio is good. Thank you, Kenneth. I appreciate that. Now, we have a limited number of seats available today, and thank you guys for all showing up early. What I am going to work on doing, and we will check on my technical prowess here, is I'm going to work on turning on everybody's webcam and audio so you can just join us here. So we will see if I manage to get that to work here. So give me half a second and we will accomplish that. The part of what I would like to make sure we do is to debunk the myth that summer is slow, and perhaps also debunk the myth that the only way that you manage to have a busy summer is do summer camps in one thing or another. And certainly if you do summer camps well and you enjoy doing that, there is nothing wrong with it, although there certainly are some pitfalls and things to avoid. I see a lot of people making some real mistakes with that. So again, we should be joined by Bob Dunn and Jeff Smith here in a second, and we will get up and running actively as I make sure all of our technical stuff is up and running. And I appreciate everybody joining us live here. So we should be ready to go in half a second. So fantastic. What I would ask everyone to do for me is we want this to be fully interactive. So I want as many questions as humanly possible. And if you'll go ahead and ask some of those questions now, I'd appreciate it. There is Grandmaster Smith. Welcome, Master Smith.
How you doing, Master?
I am wonderful. I am wonderful. And Master Smith, I'm finishing up some technical things, and we're off to the races here.
Okay.
We are live, and we have, last I looked, about 20 people with us, I think.
Okay, great.
Okay, so we should be good here. If I can get back to my primary screen. There we go. I am back to my primary screen. So let's see here. We have somebody who raised their hand, and what I'm going to try to do is figure out how to put all participants in live mode here. In theory, we can do that. Here, attendees. And so promote to panelist, promote to panelist. Master Smith, we should be putting everybody on live video feed here. And guys, as we turn you on, put your webcam on if you do in fact have it. So Master Smith, we won't have to be just talking to ourselves into the great open ether.
And make sure your camera's pointing at you. And
rather than your ceiling fan.
That's a nice I see on there from Daniel.
Yeah, quite a nice ceiling fan. It doesn't contribute much to the conversation. So, hey, Master Smith, while I'm doing this, why don't you give them a little bit of your background in martial arts school operations, and then I will give them a little bit of mine, and we will be off to the races here as I get everybody turned on and live to the greatest extent possible.
Well, I've been running martial arts schools professionally since 1970. I was a black belt student and instructor for Grandmaster Jun Rhee, who was, as most of you know, the father of American Taekwondo, who just passed away on Monday. So we're, saddened to hear that news. And anybody out there is welcome to come to his funeral services are going to be coming up next Tuesday, a week
Yeah. And I will share that information for everybody.
Okay. But that's how I came up. I ran his schools as instructor and general manager and vice president. And we built those to 13 schools we had here in the Washington, D.C. area. During that whole time as vice president, I was also competing around the country in all the point tournaments and was ranked 1 and 2 or 3 for several years there in the early 70s until 1974. I became the first world light heavyweight PKA kickboxing champion and held that world title till 1980 for 7 years. And then competed for about 3 or 4 more years after that, but couldn't get a rematch. But that's my fighting career, and then running schools, and then, of course, working with Master Oliver for a number of years. So that's a little overview.
Thank you, Master Smith. And we're all up and running here, I think. And everybody that I have seen so far, any new people who join us, I'll try to turn on their webcam and let them join us here. And we want this, guys, to be completely interactive, although certainly we have a agenda here. And my background is I joined the Junri Institute in 1969 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and then worked my way through Georgetown University as a branch manager for that organization. I came to Denver in 1983, opened 5 schools in 18 months, 6 schools in 30 months. Ended up when I was 25 with about 1,500 active students and a company that in today's terms was grossing about $3 million a year, inflation adjusted, and have continued to do that. Spent 10 years as a NASCA sanctioned director, board of directors member, tournament promoter, until I gleefully retired from being a national tournament promoter. We are now on Master Smith. Next week we have intramural number 102, I believe. So we've actually created 102 of those. And since then, Master Smith and I are both growing our Mile High Karate organization, which are now independent franchises. And we're also now working with really a top 1%, the top 5% of school owners in the world. And we have some chat function here going on, and that's great. I would invite any and everybody to ask questions, but I'd invite you to ask them live, since I'm not going to spend a lot of time paying attention to the chat, although we will try to accomplish that. Bob, I might put you in charge of reading whatever good messages get put in the chat box who don't ask them live, and I'll try to get to them all. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So, yeah. If you need a question, I'm happy to share those.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's more or less break this down into 3 pieces. And before I do that, let's start with this: is we are having summer be some of our most productive months for new enrollments of the year. And that is the opposite of what the mythology that tends to run around our industry has been. I think a lot of you might agree with that statement. So we're having, and certainly for me, June has been a strong month, going back all the way to both May and June were 2 of my biggest enrollment months. One month, and my record in June was 486 enrollments in June. But May and June have been my biggest enrollment months. I could go all the way back to the early, probably 1984. But July and August have also been incredibly good months for us. The last 4 or 5 years for sure, we've had July be some of the busiest enrollment months of the year for the schools that we're working with. And I've always had August as a big back to school push be really good, but then certainly a lot of that bleeds over into September. But I'd like you first to kind of empty your cup and say, the summer doldrums thing is nonsense. Summer can be some of your busiest and most productive times of the year. But then the 3 pieces I wanted to kind of chunk into was talk about summer camps a little bit. Some of you do that and are very, I know a few people who are real evangelical about doing those, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that particularly, but there certainly are some pitfalls that you want to be aware of and pitfalls you want to avoid. So we want to talk about that a little bit, how to do that well if you're doing it, pitfalls to avoid. And then section number 2, I really want to focus on how you make sure that summer and specifically July, August, as well as June, are your best enrollment months of this year so far, because it is certainly is doable, and in fact, it's relatively easy to do. Section number 3, some of the pitfalls that school owners have that create a dip in revenue over the summer, which is structural and is about the way they treat the students. And in fact, Master Smith, we might want to flip that and let's talk about that for a little bit, because I not too charitably talk about the bozo explosion of consultants, and every niche and industry has this nowadays, because YouTube and Facebook and social media basically lets anybody jump on a soapbox and pretend to be an expert. But one of the, Master Smith, one of the threads that I was reading in one of these different discussion forums, and I try to avoid it, but sometimes it's impossible, was somebody said, well, I decided not to do contracts because I've never sued anybody on a contract, therefore why not do a contract? But now what I have is I have a third of my students or a quarter of my students every summer want to cancel their payments and then start back in the fall when they're not as busy. Anybody here have that syndrome going on? Where you have people who are, we have one hand, William. I got to tell you, that's, I'll be charitable, William, but it's a really backwards way of thinking about things. What you want to do with your school is you want to start with an enrollment. We call it a trial enrollment, but you want to have them enrolled for a period of time where they're committed. We present it as a quarter of the way to black belt. And then you want to go through a goal setting process. Then you want them to have them committed to black belt and beyond. All of those students who get to black belt and beyond are going to have times when they go visit grandmother for a couple of weeks or a month, or they have job responsibilities where they have to travel, or they have something that comes up in their life. They're all going to periodically not be in for a week, or not be in for 2 weeks, or not be in for a month. But you shouldn't be in the mode of, if you come this month, you pay this month. If you don't come next month, you don't pay. And some people structure it where they don't think they're setting themselves up for that, but they are. So what they do is, the tuition's $149 a month, and anytime you give us 30 days notice, we'll pause it. The enrollment is $149 down, $149 a month. If you give 30 days notice, you cancel it, and then what they say is they'll be back in August, and then they'll pay $149 and get started again. Well, if that's the way you're structured, you're setting yourself up for disaster in a lot of different ways. And certainly one of the ways you're setting yourself up for disaster is that 20 or 30% drop over the summer. In our case, we present it as you're enrolled for a quarter of the way to black belt, then you're enrolled to get your black belt, then you're enrolled to black belt and beyond, maybe second, third degree black belt. That's your goal and that's your objective. You want about 100 lessons a year. You want 400 or 500 lessons to get to conditional black belt. In that process, there's times when you're going to be, maybe attending 4 times a week, and there's times that you miss 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks. Whatever that is, if you have a period that is too big a gap, we'll add that time to the program. The payments continue on if you're in fact paying monthly, and you're fine. Master Smith, what would you add to that? I mean, it's an important consideration right off the bat to not get yourself in that hole.
I think the biggest problem that everybody has when somebody signs up, they don't sell themselves as a black belt school. And when somebody comes in, if you're talking to them about signing up for a belt, like a blue belt or green belt, or you're talking to them about signing up for 6 months or a year, that's not the goal. The goal is always, we tell them when they come in that we are a black belt school. And we start everybody off on that basic or trial program, like you said, which is a year to find out if it's a good fit. And that's how you keep them, by planting that seed early. And then you're going to put them in that basic or trial program, and you're going to make sure that it's a good fit for them. And if they like it, Then we tell them that we'll talk to them later about how they can qualify for black belt training. See, the biggest mistake is that everybody tries to talk everybody into black belt. And the idea is to make sure they want to be a black belt. And you do that by pre-framing them and teaching them in the class to get excited about being a black belt and what it means. And if you do that, and then you have a qualifying process that they go through and you learn how to do that qualifying process, then they feel it's an honor to be qualified, not that just everybody qualifies.
I have a
Because
question.
at my school, we don't qualify everybody for black belt.
Yeah,
I don't want everybody on black belt.
Yeah,
I
what-
want the good.
Matt Smith, William had a question. William, go ahead.
Three-part question. One, do you structure your classes where, hey, you're going to come 4 times a week? You're going to come twice a week? How does that work? Like when you're selling you initially said that the trial would be a 1 year. So you'll sell them a 1 year contract. In that 1 year, you want 100 classes. So therefore, are you saying, hey, come Monday through Thursday or Monday through Friday every day?
Yeah. Let me answer that. That's a reasonable question. It's easy. When they come in, we're signing them up for a trial program. A basic program is what we call it. And we have classes 6 days a week. Most of our students come twice a week. So as long as you're coming twice a week, then you're going to progress at the normal rate. I don't tell them it takes 100 classes to get to whatever level.
No.
I just tell them that they're on a basic program and our students come twice a week. We have 6 days to select from. You'll pick the 2 days you come, and if something comes up and you can't make it on one of those days, then we'll make it up on another day.
Yeah.
If you get those 2 days and you want to do an extra day, there's no problem. There's no extra charge for that.
And again, we want to make sure we're on track for what it takes to be effective in summer, right? But what the 100 is 2 classes a week for 50 weeks is 100 classes. There's 52 weeks in a year. Your school may be closed a little bit and they be on vacation a little bit. So that would be the target for that first year. We're going to renew them long before they get to the year. Well, you said it was a 3-part question though, William. What was the second part?
Burnout, really. If you find children burn out if they're going to come you'd mentioned 2 times a week. Okay, fine. If he wants to come that third, that's fine. No extra charge. Is there an issue with a burnout?
That's why I tell them everybody comes, all of our students come twice a week. I said, we have some kids that want to come more, and if they want to, that's fine. But as long as you're here twice a week, then you'll be progressing at the normal rate.
Yeah, I might say it differently. Is the biggest objection you have, everyone we talk to gets fixated on price. But the biggest objection you have in today's market, whether it's a soccer mom for her 7-year-old daughter, or whether it's a 32-year-old attorney training for themselves, the biggest objection you have is time, not money, right? And William, so what we don't want to ever have is we're doing a higher level program, or we're doing, the industry jargon upgrade, which has been butchered. I've banned it for internal use, but you don't want to have it be where the next level that you're promising is you get to go from 2 times a week to 3 times a week, or you get to come from twice a week to 5 times a week, because again, the biggest objection you have is not money, it's time. The other side of it, William, is I don't really believe in burnout. What I believe is in weak and non-empowering goals, right? If I bring a new student in, and whether it's a child or an adult, and they really go through a process of visualizing, believing, being excited about the goal of black belt or whatever your individual target, some people don't use that terminology, but whatever your individual target is for their long-term goal, it's very rare that people get burnout. Where kids get burnout is mom is in type A mode. They said we can come 4 times a week, so you're going to be here 4 times a week. So what Master Smith just said is you warn the parents against it. The regular scheduled class times are going to be Tuesday, Thursday. Obviously, if you're going to miss a week or have some attendance challenges, you're welcome to come more often than that to make them up. If Joey, if it's a kid, if Joey or Susie wants to come down more often, he or she's welcome to. Don't force them to come more than twice a week if they don't want to. Does that answer your question, William?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
And the third part.
The third part was, do you have a set form that a student will fill out, that in that form it's saying, hey, what are your goals? What do you hope to accomplish from here? Is it like a questionnaire type thing other than a contract signing
We
situation?
never the term contract anyway.
Absolutely, absolutely, and you know, there are a couple terms we've already used that I don't like. I don't like sign up, and I don't like the word contract. What I would prefer is that we're having somebody become enrolled in the school. We're more like Harvard than we are, you know, some random membership organization, right? I don't want us to be thinking like we're the Gold's Gym,
Right.
like Harvard, right? So we want to think in terms of we're a school and we're an educational organization. But yeah, absolutely. In fact, if you want, you're welcome to. It's not password protected. If you want to go to milehighblackbelt.com, there's on the fifth week, there's an infomercial that I did a number of years ago that talks about a lot of that stuff. And again, renewals and upgrades, all that is off topic today. We want to stick as closely as we can to focusing on what it takes to be successful in summer. But one pitfall I see people have is they don't have a goal setting process with their students, and therefore they treat it like it's a month-to-month gym. Come out and train in this physical stuff this month. If you don't train in this physical kicking, punching, grappling, whatever stuff next month, that's fine. You know, any month you're not able to train. Well, that's a boxing gym mentality. That's not a martial arts school. And as you put yourself into, you know, which would you rather be? You know, the boxing gym in the basement that has a bunch of guys paying $45 a month to come in and whack the bags, or would you rather be an educational institute more akin to Harvard or whatever it is, right? So you want to change the dynamic of what you're doing, and therefore have them focusing on longer term attendance. And we have a couple people who are not on webcam, so I'm going to move you to panelists, and therefore you'll be live with us. Ask any questions, and you can turn on your webcam and we can see your face. We'd appreciate that if you have that available. But anyway, Matt Smith, let's move on and let's talk about, you know, in a sense, I'll call it a myth. What a lot of traditional schools end up with is that they think the only way they can have a big summer is to do a summer camp. And Matt Smith, if we were going to be in any way combative, and I'd rather be verbal than physical with you, but you have a history of liking summer camps. I have a history of not liking summer camps, and that's maybe being too aggressive on either side. But I want to talk about pros and cons of summer camps. What I have seen oftentimes is, especially maybe relatively small schools, is they promote all day, every day. Basically what they're doing is becoming a babysitting service, promote all day, every day, all summer. And the number one pitfall is, you know, they have a week of summer camp and they only have 3 kids or 5 kids or 7 kids. I mean, it's a complete waste of energy. The revenue isn't worth the time and effort. But so that's one thing is, you know, never promote more than you're likely to fill up. What I do know is that, you know, right here, beginning of May is not the time to promote a summer camp. I have a 9-year-old, going to be 10 next week, and mom was booking summer camps back in January and February. So the time to promote it is at the beginning of the year through the spring. You can still launch it, but it's probably a little late in the game. My biggest issue with summer camps is twofold. One is what I see a lot of people do is they have the same staffing, and maybe that's yourself, but they have the same staffing in there all day as they have that evening. So what they do is they spend all summer burning out their staff, and then when it's back to school, summer's over, peak season, everybody's so worn out and burnt out they don't have any energy to tribute to it. So my rule number one is if you're going to do a summer camp, you got to have a completely separate staff running the school from running the camp. And for God's sake, you as the owner operator shouldn't be showing up at 7 a.m. and leaving at 9 p.m. Running the camp. The other thing I see is that people will assume summer doldrums, assume that July is going to be slow anyway. So then what they do is they devote most of their time and energy into the summer camp, and then the school gets short shrift. They take staff from the primary school, from the primary school operations. They take their own focus away from the school operations, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? If you've got a school that's grossing $50,000 a month and you pay no attention to it for 3 months, and it does 25,000 or it does 30,000, it's easy to say, well, see, I told you summer was slow. But in reality, if you're spending your time and effort over here on the camp and not focusing on the primary business, of course it's going to do worse. Does that make sense to you guys? So that's my 2 issues, or 3, I guess. One is never promoting something that you're not going to fill up. And we can talk about how to market it. That's an easy topic. But 2 is don't let the camp be run by the same staff that's running your school, because you'll burn out your staff. And then, and this, go back to your term, William, there is such a thing as burnout. If you have all of your staff focused on spending all day in the summer camp, all evening in the school, and doing double duty, that's a big mistake to make. Now, on the other side, and Matt Smith, I'll let you be on the defense here, or defending the idea of camps. But we've had clients that I've worked with very closely. One of them did 1.4 million in revenue in summer camps over the summer. And it can be very lucrative, but you do have to avoid 2 things. You've got to avoid the standard martial arts thing of undercharging. You've got to be having a decent tuition rate. The second thing you've got to make sure you do is have it fully staffed. And the third thing you have to do is promote it well. So if you have a student body of 500 kids, families, and adults, but let's say you have a big student body of kids and families, or if you have a big transport after school care program, summer camps can be huge. It can be a lot of revenue. And as I said, I've worked with schools that had as much as 1.4 million over the summer. I just think most people screw it up pretty badly. And usually they do it from the standpoint of, they think summer is slow, so I've got to do this as a fallback to keep the revenue going, which is the wrong reason to do it, because summer can be July, August, June can be some of your best months of the year. Matt Smith, what would you add to maybe defend my distaste of summer camps?
Well, I don't even disagree with you when I have found, and I've had the same experience with my schools. If you try to utilize your same staff that is teaching in the evening, in the daytime, they will burn out, and you will, one or the other is going to lose. They're either, your regular school goes down or the camp is suffering. So you do have to have 2 separate staffing. What I found, though, is I have a lot of my black belts who are, that I call instructor trainees, that like to help in the summer camp. And it's easy to get a half a dozen of those with a couple of my parental parents that are in the school that are either parents of our students or students that are teachers that are off in the summer that need a part-time job. So in other words, you need a couple full-time adults to staff the whole thing, but then you have 5 or 6 of your teenage students that are in the leadership training or instructor training program to help out in the camp. But the main thing about the camp, where I find that it's beneficial, I use it to help our students that are currently training. I make our camp a 2-edged sword, I call it. We have beginners that are, have never taken martial arts in our beginner part. And then we have our regular students who are in the camp because they're developing and doing advanced training in the camp. So it's both a beginner and a program for our intermediate and advanced students. And no different than our regular school, you know, that we would do during the year. So we use it as a feeder for marketing out there to get somebody interested. And I will tell you, of all the beginners that come in the summer camp, we have about a 70% closing ratio on getting them enrolled in the regular program. So it's a good school feeder. And there's nothing wrong with giving a good summer program price for a beginner to get them motivated, to get them interested in the program.
Yeah.
And I'll usually run our program as an 8-week program, but they can sign up for a week at a time, and then they'll get a discount for multiple weeks and things like that. And I usually find that in the summer, our camps just running a 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. with the availability of an early drop-off or a late pickup for our working parents. So we do run it 7 to 6 if they need. Those are extra hours. But by having a camp like that, you know, it's before your regular classes start. So you have an opportunity to pull in an extra 50 to 100,000 in the school just off of that. Now, the other side of that coin.
Smith, let me try to keep us on our timeline here. Let's not go too far down that rabbit hole, if you don't mind. Maybe to summarize what you said a minute ago is, regardless of fallacious thinking of you have to have a summer camp to make money in the summer, is one thing that I've always enjoyed doing, which I think your term, Master Smith, is rank advancement camp, which is having a 1 week or a 2 week, maybe a 3 week. We've done it being here in Colorado as a retreat where we go up to a mountain camp and they sleep over for the week, or we've done it in the school where we do a 1 or 2 week intensive for the students. See, that can be very productive because you're promoting it predominantly to your own students. You're focusing predominantly on your advanced students. Matt Smith, you and I just did a black belt, kind of a same thing, an intensive 3-day with brown belts and black belts, mostly black belts. We had, a couple hundred, maybe as many as 300 black belts there. You can do things like that, and especially with size, our retreats would be only black belts or only brown and black belts, where it would be a week in the mountains and intensive training and focused training. So there are a lot of iterations you can do, and once you get out of desperation thinking, and I find most martial artists that we deal with come into us with a lack of abundance in their frame of vision. If you expand and get out of that poverty thinking, you start coming up with some creativity, and the more creativity you come with, frankly, it goes hand in hand. You start creating revenue out of that as well. Any last thought, Master Smith, before we move into our primary topic, or any questions from anybody?
I have a question.
Yeah, and everybody's muted right now, so you can unmute yourself on the screen there, the little microphone, and be live at any point. But go ahead, William.
The 8-week program, 9 to 3 p.m., that's 6 hours. So you got a student training for 6 hours, whether it's a child or an adult?
No, they don't do martial arts for 6 hours. It's a summer camp, so they do crafts and arts and games and things like that. Our karate program, the martial arts part of it, is usually 2 hours. We'll do 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the afternoon. So then the other time is filled with crafts and arts and games and having a good fun time.
Who thinks that stuff? Is it a kid that thinks it up, or where do you get those? I mean, I have a 10-year-old daughter. I can't keep up with her with doing crafts and arts, but I mean,
that's why you have the school teachers come in. You know, when you get some of your, and I will tell you that our female instructors and our female teachers are very good at those crafts type things. And each day they make a little something, some kind of little event, and to be honest with you, don't ask me because my wife does it. Okay.
Okay.
Good at
That's
that.
fine. No, I think it's a great idea. It's something.
Let me answer that from a different question. What you are talking about is when it transitions from babysitting from martial arts, right? So my objection to this type stuff tends to be, I'm going to take the brown and black belts and do a retreat, and we're going to do a high level thing, and they're going to train maybe 4, 5, 6 hours a day, but they're going to do some other fun stuff and team building and hiking and ropes courses. I like stuff like that. But when it comes into mom and dad are working and we're going to watch the kid all day, that gets to be into what Master Smith was talking about. Now, there's a big market for that, without a doubt. And like as we've been exploring camps for my son, we don't need daycare. What we want is, I'd like it to be tech training, coding immersion, which is kind of hard to find, or high level martial arts development, or second language immersion. You know, stuff like that would be the stuff that we look for him. And in those cases, that tends to be the primary topic is the primary topic. And a lot of those can be 9 to noon or noon to 3. And, you know, I find a lot of these where we'll pay $279 for 3 hours a day. That's all tech stuff, right? So there are a lot of different ways to thread this needle. And so at one end you have, I do transport after school care during the week because they need daycare. And now I transition them into summer camp because they need all day daycare during the summer. That's one extreme. And the one I mentioned that had done 1.4 million over the summer, that was their primary business. Their primary business was transport after school care. And so they had 4 locations, average of 170 kids per location in transport after school care. So a good chunk of those kids also transitioned into the summer program, and that was responsible for 1.4 million in revenue. But see, that's at one end of the spectrum. At the other end of the spectrum is you can do something. It could be very high priced, by the way. It could be, you know, $579 for the week or $679 or whatever for the week. You do the high intensity martial arts training that's designed really just to be martial arts training. But then, you know, again, if it's an overnight camp or something, you want to transition it into philosophy, and you want to transition it into team building exercises, rope course, that type stuff. So there's that spectrum, and you can sort of really decide where you want to be on the spectrum, right? My main point would be is July doesn't have to be slow regardless. So if you're doing it just because you're trying to fill a revenue gap, that's the wrong reason to do it. Master Smith, you said something a minute ago too. One of the most successful summer camps I ever saw, and this is probably 20 years ago now, is Will Mayer. And Will Mayer in Columbia, Maryland had a ninjutsu school of about 700 students. And what he did is he hired a lady who was in education, but she, if I remember correctly, had a master's in education administration, and she was an administrator for the local school system, and she was in charge of the camp, right? So then, depending upon how many kids you have, you have a certain, person, counselor per kid ratio, but she is in charge of hiring, supervising, everything. And then Will or one of his staff members would come in for an hour or 2 a day to teach martial arts. So at one, and by the way, he did, I think, $400,000 a year, and this is 20 years ago probably, in summer camps. So if you have a very relatively successful school with a large number of students, you can draw enough internally that you can fill that kind of camp. And by the way, you can also market and draw this externally. That's our next topic here, is we want to get into marketing. So you can fill these things externally as well. I just would never do it other than the way Master Smith said, which is you're only enrolling people for into the camp in order for them to become full-time students. You're not thinking of they come to you for 6 weeks or 2 months over the summer and then they're gone. Does that make sense to everybody? Any other questions before we move into our next topic?
Master Oliver, you have a few questions in the chat box, which actually leads right into our direct topic. And I think the one from Roberto heads off and answers one from Ian, and then also Eugene. So Roberto said, what are the best strategies to create leads for the summer? And then Ian had one, what is the best thing you're doing to get people to call in, start the funnel process, set appointments, walk up. And then, of course, Eugene, what strategy is recommended to get people in your school? So I think Roberto's kind of leads in and answers all of those questions in one shot. And also kicks off what we're hitting on.
Yeah, exactly. It goes into our next topic. And I had seen those and was intentionally ignoring them because they were off topic until now. The one uses, internet marketing terminology, the funnel process. And I might just make a quick note about that is it's good that martial artists are getting more indoctrinated into online marketing thinking. But there's a big problem is, I have friends who who are very successful online, but they have email lists. One has an email list so big that it broke Infusionsoft. He had to have like 3 different accounts to do it. Another one has an email list of like 1.2 million people. Matt Fury is one of those that has done really well. But you've got to be careful. If you're a martial arts school and you're drawing from a 3 or 5 mile radius, don't get sucked into the different funnel language and get stuck into thinking that email is a panacea. Because you do have to recognize, one is they're dealing in huge numbers and tiny conversion rates. So a lot of those guys, if they're converting, 4 or 5% of prospects, they're tickled to death. And for us, we want to convert 70 or 80% of the prospects. And you can't do 70 or 80% by putting them into some funnel and, subscribing them to an autoresponder sequence, hoping that pays off. Does that make sense as a brief aside? But yeah, let's go into marketing. And as we do this, I want to take a side note here for a second. We're going to use some language about kids market or adult market. And I want you to understand, if we're ever talking about a kids marketing system, works just as well in the adult market with very few exceptions. You just have to translate to what's the principle and what's the strategy. And sometimes the tactics are different. So if I, in the normal year, not during the summer probably, but in the school year, I might go into an elementary school and be very effective with generating maybe 30 enrollments from a couple weeks in an elementary school. And then I'll have folks who teach Krav Maga or MMA, one thing or another, predominantly adult oriented. They immediately say, well, that's not for me because I teach adults. Well, the same concept works just as well. We have one of our members, Elite MMA, they're in Houston. Instead of going to an elementary school, they go to British Petroleum's headquarters and work through the Human Resources Department and go in and do what I would call gym teacher for the day in the PE class, but they go do a presentation to all of their employees, and then they get an employee strategy to convert those employees into the school. See, it's the same strategy, different tactics in a different audience. So with all of these things that we're going to do, don't ever listen to an adult marketing idea and assume that doesn't work for you because you want kids and families, or listen to a kid's marketing idea and assume that doesn't work for you because you're with adults. And Matt Smith, you said a minute ago, Ms. Smith, you said a minute ago, Grandmaster Reese sadly passed away on Monday morning. And again, any of you who are touched by him are welcome to come to the funeral next Tuesday. I'll share that information for everyone. One of my favorite quotes of his, and Kevin, if you don't mind, I'm going to mute you unless you have a question. But one of my favorite quotes of his is, martial arts without philosophy is just street fight. One of the biggest problems I see nowadays is that MMA schools, Krav Maga schools, schools that are more adult oriented, try to fit themselves in the category of being like Gold's Gym, rather than fit themselves in the category of being an educational institution. And as soon as you fit yourself in the category of being Gold's Gym, you're fitting yourself into a category that has some real downsides. One downside is Herculean turnover, horrible retention. Same thing, flip sides, right? You put yourself in a category where it's about physicality. It's not about personal development. It's not about emotional development. It's not about developing the whole human being. Where students get excited and stay, and where, frankly, you'll make the most money, is transitioning the physical to the developmental. That's just as true with a 22-year-old girl who wants to lose a few pounds before her sister's wedding, as it is with a 32-year-old man who wants to learn Krav or MMA because it seems like it'd be a cool way to stay in shape, as it is for a 7-year-old child. And in fact, with me, coming from the Junior Institute, a lot of what I was doing in the 80s and 90s was translating adult ideas and teaching them to kids. And by the way, the feedback I was getting is the same feedback we get now, but the opposite. Well, that's adult stuff. You can't teach kids that. The kids have to be entertained. The adults are the ones that can understand that. And so, get out of your own way on that kind of stuff. We scheduled this for about an hour, and we're just starting to get into marketing. And I want to answer any and all questions. Matt Smith, I know you have a hard break here in about 15 minutes. If it's that correct. Let me make a note now. One of the things that, the thing that we are going to launch for everybody over the next 6 weeks or so is a program to help you completely dominate results in the summer. Take whatever you did in March or April, and let's try to double that for July and August. And we probably will leave today with more questions than answers. We're going to try to give you some real meat and substance, and hopefully there's been that already. But you might want to write this down. Bob, you can share it in the chats and discussion and all that crap, since I'm not going to do it. But if you go to martialartswealth.com/summer success, or you could give Bob a call directly. He's right there in the blue shirt, 720-256-0208. I got that right, didn't I, Bob? But martialartswealth.com/summer success, or give Bob a call. And what we're going to do is there'll be more explanation there, but we're going to do basically what we're doing today with a smaller group, obviously, for the next 5 or 6 weeks, starting right now, going into June, to hold everybody's hand step by step by step with all of the opportunities that you can do in midsummer to really be successful. So again, I know that in an hour we're not going to get every and all questions answered, but I want to give you some ideas right now. So I always promoted, not always, but for many years promoted a summer special. It could be promoted as a summer camp, but it wasn't really a summer camp. It wasn't what we're talking about here. I always promoted a summer special of some sort, starting May 1st, going strongly through about June 15th. In other words, going late into June. And usually it would be, and the right way to think about it is it would be some kind of longish introductory offer, which nowadays are, in our current terminology, it would be something like was a Groupon offer. But an offer that was maybe a 5-week or a 6-week, we've done as long as 3 months. In experimenting with it over the years, I don't like it to be that long. I prefer it to be 4 to 6 weeks. But promote some type of summer special as an introductory offer. Now, the importance of doing that, and notice we're not talking about July and August yet. We're just talking about May and June. So when I talk about 486 enrollments in June, that was off of promoting a summer special, getting people to come into a summer special, then converting them to standard enrollments, right? Now, when you do that, what the thing that you had, and this is the same as Groupon, it's same as any offer. I told Lloyd Irvin years ago that we were having success with a 30-day free offer, and then that became like the standard for MMA schools, is everybody thought it has to be 30 days free. Well, that's a offer that works. It's just it doesn't have to be the only offer, right? And sometimes the mistake that people make is they do a 6-week trial offer or a 2-month trial offer in Groupon, or they do it as a summer offer. And then what they do is they wait for 6 weeks to ask them to enroll. And that's death, because most of them won't even still be there in 6 weeks. What you want to do is on the first lesson or the second lesson, Master Smith and I have always preferred the second. On the first or second lesson, you want to have a rationale for why they are going to go ahead and enroll on the trial enrollment, which is that initial 12 months, in prelude to being approved to train to black belt and beyond. Does that make sense to everybody? So,
Cut off for one brief second.
Go ahead.
You said after the second lesson, and then it was cut off. I didn't hear. I'm sorry.
No problem. So let's say that I do a summer special, and it's 6 weeks, $97 includes the uniform.
All right.
And you know,
How much?
And our rates right now are $247 a month for an enrollment. So they'll do like 300 plus 247 to enroll, 247 a month, and then they'll ultimately renew to about 500 a month. So if I'm doing 97 for 6 weeks, that's a super low price, right? But what I want when they come in to enroll, before, and I could do it on the website, I could do it when they call, but what I want to do is I want to have them pay the $97 at first contact. So they call, preferably I get them on the phone, preferably they call me, or I call them, and I get them on the phone. I would go ahead and get a credit card, register them for the $97 summer offer. And then when they come in for the first lesson, and you know, there's some discussion on whether a 1 lesson or 2 lesson intro is best. My perspective is with adults, I want to enroll them on the first lesson usually. And with kids, I want to do 2 lessons because I require both parents, any decision makers there. I want them to be fully informed, right? But so William, what you may have missed is if they're coming in for a 6-week offer, you've got to enroll them on the first couple lessons. You don't just put them in class. And this is why, you know, like with Groupon, back when it was really working well, is, you know, some people would sell 150 Groupons, but then they wouldn't enroll anybody. Well, what were they doing? I mean, a lot of them were getting sucked in by the fake consultants, and they were like sending them an email in 3 weeks asking them if they wanted to enroll. Well, that doesn't work. You know, I mean, don't rely on email. Email's dying a slow and painful death. But what you want to do is have a premise so they come in and take the first, let's say, 2 lessons. And when they enroll the second lesson, there's a discount. The free month is added on. And then they have a rationale for enrolling in your normal trial program. And what we're not wanting to do is bring in a bunch of students who are going to be students just for the summer. What we're wanting to do is bring in a bunch of students who are going to be students, you know, forever, hopefully, but certainly enroll in the normal year and then hopefully renew from there. Did they answer that question, William?
And Master Oliver, I think the problem that a lot of schools out there have is they think of their summer special as a moneymaker from the price of the special. And just remember that normally a basic student for a year is worth about $3,000 in our system. And a renewal process for that student can be worth up to $20,000.
Yeah.
So that's converting one student off of that summer special into a regular program. So how many students would you have to get to equal one signing up for a year at $3,000 versus, you know, getting, you know, 300 or 100 students in at you know, $100. So the idea is to convert them. And some people say, well, how do you convert them in 1 or 2 lessons? Well, obviously they have to do the first lesson, and you can't convert them until they, what I call, buy into the program emotionally, which is what you want them to do in 1 or 2 lessons. For adults, you give them a semi-private class with other beginners coming in. They can usually make a decision right then. They either like it or they don't. And they like it enough to at least make a commitment for a basic program, which is just going to teach them the basic skills to see if they want to pursue more training onto the black belt. And all you do is take that money that they paid, and if they paid $99 and you're giving them a credit for that $99 of half off on the down payment, and you're giving them a discount on the regular monthly tuition for doing it now, we have about a 70 to 80% closing ratio on those numbers when we do it that way. And that is if you're teaching a good intro. And I will tell you, there's some people that don't know how to pre-frame in that intro to get them, confident enough to get them to make a commitment for that basic program.
Absolutely. But again, we want to get a little bit more marketing here before we have to go. But what the biggest premise is whatever the introductory offer, and certainly something that's presented as some kind of summer special tends to work well right now, is you want to make sure you don't change the way you do your normal enrollment, and you still enroll them at the first or second lesson. And you've got to have some rationale for why you do that. Otherwise, in almost all cases, I mean, there are exceptions, but the conversion rate will be very weak. Okay.
Stephen,
can
I ask a quick question?
Go ahead.
Stephen, what do you think is the most effective marketing tool to bring people through the door? You know, that because we some of us has summer program set up. Some people have the summer special already set up. But the question today is, what is the best marketing tool we can use to bring people through the door? You know, so they can come for a trial class.
You bet. And then Ian, you have a question. So let me address that, and then we'll come back to you, Ian. Okay. I guess here's the first answer to that. Roberto, right?
Yeah.
Roberto, I always hesitate and often contradict when anybody says what is the best, because the premise should be, which I freely admit I stole this concept from Jay Abraham years ago. The concept should always be the Parthenon. A Parthenon meeting, if you need 20 enrollments a month, have 20 different things going on all the time, right? And to use his language again, he says most small businesses have a diving board. So they have one pillar, and if that one pillar stops working, they're dead in the water. And so, Roberto, the first premise of all of the marketing that we teach is there's no such thing as the best.
Okay.
Now, if I was going to use your framework and say, what's the thing that's most guaranteed to generate a lot of traffic at the most reasonable, cost-effective manner, the thing that we have the most of our members knocking it out of the park are all kinds of varieties of live events. And, you know, I'll separate this into two categories: referral marketing, but external marketing, if that's a reasonable way to say it. But for referral marketing, it's internal live events. For external marketing, it's finding external live events that are productive. So I like being in movie theaters. We had several of our members who made 60, 70, 80 appointments this last weekend at Infinity Wars. I hear some of the bozo explosions saying, oh, that's difficult to do, or the theaters won't let you in. No, it's really easy to do. It's straightforward. One company controls 80% of the screens in North America. It's a simple process. But in the summer, what you know is that there's lots of outdoor events, you know, everything from Taste Of to 5K Run for Cancer to, you keep going on all that stuff. There's all the kind of charity fund runs. There's picnic type of things that are open to the public. There's Taste Of whatever, right? There's all of these big events that happen. And the first warning about those is make sure they have the right demographics, right makeup of people, right makeup of income, right makeup age-wise. you know, I mean, you wouldn't be running a kids program, go to the retirement village, expect to have good results. Although if you're running a Tai Chi program for elders, maybe that is the right place. So Roberto, if I were going to answer that directly, I would say the biggest likelihood of a home run is finding big events where your target audience is going. And one of the things I like are movie theaters during a blockbuster. Another thing that I like are all the charity fun runs and so forth. And then it's a matter of having a booth with the right structure. Usually we'll have somebody in costume, we'll have a big prize wheel. They'll line up, spin the wheel to win a prize. They'll fill out an information form before they spin the wheel. After they spin the wheel, we'll make an appointment. Our efficacy tends to be 80% making an appointment, going through the line. And the one issue is there's really only one script you need, which is they say, I got to go check with husband, wife, schedule, some excuse of I'll get back to you later. And you got to know at that intersection, you say, well, of course, we are going to be a little busy next week. So what I'd love to do is pencil you in for a time tentatively that you think will work. And then I'm going to give you our contact information and so forth. If that's not a good time, we can always move it. But that way you've held a spot for Billy or for you or whichever. And usually that just opens up the conversation with, well, I know we have a church event on Monday night. I know we have I'm working on Tuesday. Do you have something later in the week? And then I can say, here's the times on Wednesday, here's the times on Thursday. Well, I think we could do Thursday. Why don't we hold that spot, right? I mean, that ends up being the conversation. So, an outlier, Colby Winkler at a marathon. He was out there for 6 hours, 180 leads, 150 appointments, 100 intros, 54 enrollments from one event. Now, that's admittedly an outlier. That's not the norm. But more normal would be Rob Adelick in Niagara Falls, Canada. Not exactly a huge metropolitan area. It's not Manhattan. Matt Smith remind me it was 60 leads, 52 appointments. And of course, that was just 48 hours ago. So 60 leads, 52 appointments. Does that number rings right, Matt Smith?
Yeah, he had actually 80 leads and 60 appointments.
Okay. So I was a little off, but 80 leads, 60 appointments. And again, the norm would be half or a little more of those show up. So 60 appointments equals 30 or 40 intros. Half or a little bit more of those enroll. So 40 intros, 20 enrollments. See, that's not a bad way to spend a couple days, right? So Roberta, if I was going to take the number one thing that's likely to work in July is that kind of, in June, August as well. Now, if you expand upon that Parthenon, we have a 3-hour session. If you guys do our Summer Success Deal, I will make sure you get the recordings of Master Smith's 3-hour session where he went through like every grassroots type of marketing stuff that you could do that's inexpensive or free. So I'll make sure you guys get that. We don't have 3 hours to go through all that.
That A to Z marketing that I covered, was that Roberto that asked that question?
Yes.
That A to Z marketing is going to cover, see, what most people are always looking for is the one home run. And what ends up happening is you don't have that home run, or if the home run doesn't work. Now, Colby and some of our other guys have done it, but you have as a backup about 15 other things that you're doing both internally and externally at the school. And by implementing all of these multi things, now, again, some of them are low cost but labor intensive. Others cost more, and then there's not much labor. So it depends on where you are in the spectrum. You know, our lower grossing schools don't have the money to throw out on marketing. So they have to rely more on a little more labor.
That's with your connection with Adonis.
Yours too.
Yeah, Bob, I think we have somebody after you. Oh, I that would be me dealing with that.
You got it? You got it? Nope.
Perhaps we'll see. I don't know where that's going. Okay, Chris. No. Okay, Ian. Let me go to your question. I'm going to come back to a little bit more, Roberto, on that. But it's a good question, Roberto. Ian, what was?
Yeah, two-part question. Yeah, two-part question is, what are the things that you guys are doing once you get to your booth, once you get to your event at the park? What kind of offer? Is it usually a free thing or a sold thing?
Well, both. For instance, if we're in a movie theater, usually they don't want you to have them pay money. In that situation, what they're worried about is they're going to give you their last $30 and they're not going to buy popcorn and a drink, which is where all their profits are made, right? If you're in an environment where you can have them pay for an introductory program, the good thing about having them pay is it improves the show rate. The bad thing about the paid is it reduces the close rate in many cases, right? So you're working that balance. But the rule is, I don't want to do anything where I leave. Well, first, I don't want to do anything where I'm looking for just exposure. I got a big sign up, that does me no good. Number two, I have a big sign up and I passed out 10,000 flyers. That does me this much good, right? However, if I get a lead, that's a big jump. But if I get the appointment on the spot, it's even bigger. And the purpose of the appointment on the spot nowadays is not only is email dying a slow and painful death, but in the age of mobile, nobody answers their damn phone, right? And I overstate the case, but if I end up with a lead list of 200 people and I call through those 200 people, what we know in the mobile era is you're probably going to get 5 or 10% of them to answer the phone the first round, right? Which necessitates, when you're doing calls, you call, leave a message, text them, and then email. And the text is going to be the one that works the best. But Ian, to be responsive to your question, usually we're doing a free offer. I like a paid offer better, but I would want it to be a paid offer that one of the things we can do with, whether it be Walmart or a charity, let's say it's the Cancer Fund Run, is I could do $27 for 5 weeks in the uniform. They pay the $27, but the $27 goes to the charity, right? And that gives me a great hook for getting into a lot of these charity events, because I'm doing a fundraiser for them. And it gets them to give us money, which makes the appointment more solid, right? Now, in all cases, you'll notice Master Smith and I, we don't care about however much they pay for the introductory. We're, if it comes to us, all we're looking at is maybe it defrays some of the marketing costs. He used a couple of terms, a couple of ways. Master Smith, you have a appointment you have to go to? Or are you good?
I told him that I would be a few minutes late.
Okay. But in all cases, what he talked about is what an enrollment's worth, what a renewal's worth. I often look at it differently of what's the average lifetime value. And we're getting a lot of our schools now to $6,000 or $7,000 lifetime value per student. So if it costs me, $300 to make an appointment, and then they're going to pay $27, I don't care about either one of those things. It's rounding error. All I really care about is getting the enrollment in, right? And I see a lot of broke guys get fixated on, I can get 100 of them at $99. Well, I'll give away the $99 any day of the week, all day on weekends, in order to get somebody into my school, because I know my closing rate in the school will be high, 50 to 70% or better, and then I know they're going to be worth $6,000, $7,000. So that's all I'm concerned about.
And then the other part of that question is, once you get that adult on that first introductory lesson, or that kid after the second one, are you guys usually doing like an opt-in versus an opt-out thing to close them, or like a incentive program, something to say like, here's your money back towards all your stuff?
Yes.
What are you guys doing to get that? What's the best way that you guys?
Define what you mean by opt-in, opt-out.
So we played with a thing where it's basically like you come in and you sign up as long as you don't cancel at the end of it. They're already in. And then we don't have to, and then like their billing is going to start at the end of that free 30 days or whatever too. So they have to tell us if they want to quit, but to start their free 30 days, they have to start by being signed up. But we've also played with it where it's like they sign up and your billing starts Monday, but we're going to give you your trial back. We're going to give you this money back towards your program, towards your enrollment, but now your billing starts Monday. That's like our incentive plan. And we've done both, but I'm curious if you guys are doing something different or something similar and what's better for you.
The first one, and again, I mean, all answers to this is about tracking stats, right? If you're doing one of these things and you keep 90% of them into full paying students and then 90% of them renew, it's working. Don't mess with what's working. With the exception of if you're charging $99 a month rather than $197 or $247, it's problematic there. You're not going to make that up in volume. The first one I personally don't like very well. And in part, I don't like systems that replace me being the program director, me being the admissions counselor, with trying to automate it in any way. Because I'd rather, and this is coming from a multi-school operator standpoint, Master Smith was running at one time 13 locations directly in the Junior Institute. I maxed out at 6 locations here. But if I'm having to train staff to do it, I'd still rather train them to be counselor, to be admissions director, to explain what the process is and get them engaged, as opposed to try to automate it and eliminate the conversation. Does that make sense, Ian? So, so if the stats are good on that, it's fine. I personally don't like it as well because I would rather. I mean, maybe this is a little bit of an aside, but what most people think is the key to retention is I've got a charismatic instructor in classes is exciting. Well, those aren't the keys. And in fact, sometimes it's counterproductive. Okay. What the keys are is relationship and goals. If the student sets a long-term goal to go to black belt and beyond, and you build a really tight personal bond with each and every student in that first 6 weeks and continue it, they're not going anywhere, right? But students keep coming back because they like you, because they like the other people in class. They don't want to disappoint you. They don't want to disappoint them. That you're a joy to the spirit and they love being there. And because ultimately they transition from, for a kid, for instance, this is something we're going to do between soccer and hockey, to there's elementary school, middle school, high school. There's the martial arts school teaching character, confidence, focus, and discipline. And then there's these recreational seasonal events. So if you transition and help them set goals and you build relationship, the single best school I've ever seen on retention is Buzz Durkin. He doesn't have a charismatic instructor per se, unless you consider being the nicest person ever to walk the face of the earth as being a charismatic instructor, and has a curriculum that I would consider extremely simple to the point of being boring. But what he does have is himself, every one of his staff fit that definition of one of the nicest human beings ever, where nobody falls through the cracks. Everything gets recognized, and each student feels personally, maybe the right word is put on a pedestal, but they feel personally welcomed, embraced as part of the family, and missed if they're gone, right? So I dislike systems that try to take out relationship and conversation to make sales easy. Does that make sense, Ian?
Yes.
So it's not that won't work. When you're looking at your numbers, if your numbers are working with that, fine. Now, Master Smith said yes right away. And what he was saying yes to is absolutely you have to give them a rationale that can't be, you paid for 6 weeks, you either paid for 6 weeks, do your 6 weeks, and then you're going to pay the same amount after 6 weeks, or you enroll now and you lose the 6 weeks and pay more now, right? I mean, see that I would never state it that way, but that as a rationale doesn't work, right? So we're typically doing something to the effect of, you pay $97 for 6 weeks. Obviously, the reason you did that, let's say it's for a child, the reason you did that, Ms. Jones, is to let Joey try it out, see if this is something he's excited about, whether he likes the school, whether you feel comfortable with the school. Obviously, most people who do that are only looking to evaluate for this to become an ongoing thing. Wouldn't you agree? Sure. Well, if you go ahead and finalize your enrollment at the next lesson, what we do, since usually it takes 1 or 2 lessons to really make that decision, not 6 weeks, is what we'll do is we'll give you a credit for the $97. We'll give you, in fact, a $300 discount for that. And at the same time, you'll still get the 6 weeks free, right? So basically what I'm saying is, they'll save $300. And that's usually enough leverage that next time, and then what they'll say oftentimes is, well, can I still do the 6 weeks and get that enrolled in? If the answer is, of course you can. I just hate to see you pay the extra $300 and lose the 6 weeks. Does that make sense, Ian?
Yeah. And I know feel like I'm asking all the questions right now, but
no, it's fine.
One more thing. I'm kind of trying to get away from the thought process of money, of enrollments. I mean, enrollments equal money and all these different things, but I've been really caught up in money. I'm trying to fix that. And what I want to try to ask you guys is, like, if there's 3 or 5 things that are the most important pre-action plans that are creating good results. I mean, if we had, we have like 100 students right now, but if we had 200 students come through the doors in a week, obviously we'd be a lot happier with where things are financially. So what are some of the 3 to 5 things pre-action that are creating some of your best results, like on and down the line?
That's a good question, Ian. And we're about 15 minutes over our timeline. Master Smith, if you want to go ahead and go to your appointment, since I'm hogging the air.
Okay. And let me just say one last thing to Ian. That A to Z marketing, Master Oliver, if you're going to make that available for them in any way, that Ian is going to give you about probably 30 to 50 things to choose from. And the reason I go through that many things is because there's a lot of internal and external and internet type stuff and live stuff and birthday parties and all other kind of stuff in there. And so you can go through there and you need to find yourself about a dozen to 15 things minimum to be doing every month that are going to draw enough traffic that you're going to be able to get that 15 or 20 or 30 enrollments per month. And you could very easily, Ian, double your, if you're at 100 students, you could very easily double your enrollment within 6 to 12 months with a good retention program added on to it. So I'm going to hop off. Thanks for
Thank you, sir.
Guys, and hope to hear from y'all later. Bye.
And Ian, I will give you a very focused answer. What I will say is, we've only scratched the surface on marketing today, and I apologize for that, but it's a big topic. If you want to go to martialartswealth.com/summer success, we're going to do this for the next 6 weeks, and it will be, and there's some CDs, DVDs, all kinds of stuff that we'll send you to support that. But it's all going to be about how July could be your best enrollment month of the year. And we've talked a little bit about some of the things, events and internal and so forth. But Ian, let me speak directly to your question. And I'm going to go at it from 2 different angles. And the first one I would say is, my initial diagnostic with any school is how many active students? You just told me 100. What are you charging right now?
Most people have like a $55 a week plan. So it's about $238 a month.
Okay. So $238 a month, and that's fine. Do you have a renewal beyond that?
Yeah, we have a Black Belt Club program that is generally 3 to 4 years.
Okay. What's the charge for that?
We'll do a couple different things. We'll try not to decrease the price based on what they're already investing, and increase some value, but we'll do as much as like a 20% discount if they do a paid in full based on the 55 a week. A lot of it is just based on what they're already doing without really charging them more. It's just we get that 3 to 4 year commitment.
Okay. Well, I'll give you one thought real quick is we're usually doing it the opposite. And think about what the cost of private preschool is versus a private elementary school versus a private middle school versus a private high school versus high quality private college, right? And if you take them all in the same spectrum of, top 10% or whatever, maybe it leads up to Harvard, or maybe it leads up to, the local 4-year college, there's always an escalation in cost and value, not even. And a lot of people do it the opposite way where it goes down. So we're usually doing a renewal where we have a higher level that's maybe double that initial enrollment. So from, $240 a month to almost $500, and then something in between. But if I was going to give a simple answer to the question you asked, is the world around us has a tendency to get busy being busy. And oftentimes the busier you're being busy, the more you're Instagramming and Twittering and Facebooking and, watching TV and all the other distractions. Plus in your business, the more you're responding to the immediate urgencies and demands, the less you're focusing on what matters, right? And so the first thing to do is always learn how to unplug, turn off, throw away, being immediately responsive to email, and now unless it's a prospect, but, throw away being immediately responsive to email. People who email me get a autoresponder with me pulling my hair out, says I've given up on email, and then gives them other ways to get to somebody but me. So the first thing I would say is always guard yourself against being busy, right? Focus on priorities. Ultimately, you have 3 priorities: getting new students, keeping them as long as possible, in part by helping them set a goal and really thinking in terms of following through to black belt or beyond. And then having the most dramatic positive impact you can have on their lives as possible. And what Master Smith and I find is that almost everyone we talk to think, if I just got 10 new students a month, if I just got 20 new students a month, if I just had one thing that would add 100 new students a month, everything would be great. But in reality, usually they have a dropout problem. We're targeting 1 or 2% a month or better dropping out. So usually they have a dropout problem. Usually they have a lifetime value problem, to speak in terms of quantifiable numbers. Usually they are promising things that they're not truthfully delivering. So they're talking in terms of unshakable confidence and focus and discipline, and this is going to help your child do their homework. They're promising things that they're not honestly delivering in a very effective way. So I always, if you want the short answer to that, Ian, is I focus on, I've got to have enough enrollments. The way to have enough enrollments is the Parthenon. And we can tune and tweak ratios, get better effectiveness and all that stuff. But it's have enough new students, keep them long enough to have a dramatic impact on their life, and keep improving your deliverable so you are in fact having a life-shattering difference. Does that make sense? So I work with a lot of MMA and Krav schools, and they will come to me and they say, well, all this stuff you're talking about is kid stuff. It's like, well, no, it's not. Look, if you're a Krav school, all you need to do is look at that movie featuring Jennifer Lopez. The movie featuring Jennifer Lopez wasn't about her being able to fight really well. Hell, it could have been. She goes and buys a .45 and waits and shoots the guy, right? It was about her developing the confidence to stand on her own. It was about her developing the perspective to abstent herself from a bad situation. And it was about giving her the confidence and the physicality to deal with the situation if she had to. What we get focused on is we get focused on the technical, where the emotional and the developmental and the life skills is the valuable thing. Does that make sense, Ian?
Yes.
With that having been said, I've often been branded, and Jun Rhee was often branded. He was, Black Belt Magazine, 1970, called him the Pied Piper of Taekwondo. But if you believe so thoroughly in what you're doing, you should never be shy about sharing it with the community in any and every avenue available. You shouldn't be shy about wanting to be in each and every elementary school and showing them what the value of what you're doing is, being in every company and showing them what the value of what you're doing is. You shouldn't be shy about spending a fortune in media. You shouldn't be shy about direct mail. You shouldn't be shy about email and texting and calling and all that stuff. And I find that most people, they say they want more students, but they're shy about sharing their message. I got to tell you, in Jun Rhee's life, he was the opposite of shy. He was showing up at the Washington Post office, trying to get them to do an article on him 3 times a week. He was beating the door down at CNN and all the different TV stations. I just saw Washington Post had a notice of his death and funeral. But the Washington Post, I don't know how many hundreds of articles they did on him over the years, but it was incredible. And by the way, Bruce Lee, Muhammad Ali, I mean, you can go through the list. These are all people who aren't shy about sharing their message and work to get their message shared in every way possible. So many times we think that we really believe in what we do, but then we're shy about sharing that with the world. So don't be shy about sharing it with the world.
Is that kind of your message sometimes for referrals too?
Well, yeah.
I'm having a tough time getting referrals.
Well, I'll give you the quick secret to referrals is what people think is I'm going to enroll somebody, give them a stack of guest passes, and they're going to go sell martial arts to their friends. Well, that doesn't work. And I got to tell you, I've had an awful lot of very highly paid staff over the years. Most of them weren't very good at go, to Starbucks and tap somebody in the shoulder and pitch them. Or my next door neighbor, who I know fairly well, in a cold environment, most of them weren't all that great at selling what we do either, truth be told, right? So it's a fool's errand to expect that most of your students are going to be good at going and talking their friends into it. Does that make sense to you, Ian?
Yes.
But the secret to referrals is creating events and opportunities where they're comfortable with inviting their friends. In the kids market, that might be a birthday party or a pizza party. In the adult market, it might be a witness to the belt graduation. It might be UFC fight night. We could go on this list forever. But you want to create an event or an excuse that they're comfortable with inviting their kids. My 9-year-old's birthday is coming up soon. Well, he's already got the list in his mind of his buddies at school and his buddies in other activities, relatives that he all wants to come to whatever his birthday party is. So, and last year it was Dart Wars where they do Nerf guns. Well, there were 35 kids there, right? Well, that's one thing. And it doesn't have to be the only thing. It doesn't have to be the primary. But the biggest way you get referrals is stuff like that. The 2 best schools I've ever seen in my life on generating referrals, one was Steve Doyen in Connecticut. It was almost all through birthday parties. The other was Steve LaValle. And his was almost all through invitations to the belt graduations. The belt graduations were a big show, not a testing per se. When they came in, the program director would get the contact information on the way in and schedule them for a free introductory, give them a VIP pass, 30 days free, and then they would do an intro and enroll them. LaValle was able to, for almost all the years, generate every enrollment he needed for replacement, to stay even from referrals. Doyen at one time was doing 70, 75 enrollments a month from birthday parties. The reality is it was direct mail and it was other follow-up. So it wasn't just, the party itself. But, those are 2 things that are proven winners. But what's a proven non-winner is just hand them a stack of guest passes and say, hey, go bring your friends, right? The other proven winner, by the way, which I won't spend any time on, is 7-year-old girl comes in the door, adding mom and dad right then and there. So I'm usually getting 50, 60% efficacy of the child comes in, I'll get one or both parents enrolled day one. So to give you an idea. We're way over time limit, but did that answer your question, Ian?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I'll remind everybody, martialartswealth.com/summer special. I'd be happy to answer one or two more questions, but other than that, we'll call it a day here pretty quick. If you have a question, unmute yourself. Otherwise, we'll call it a day.
Summer success, sir, right? You said
Yeah.
summer special. Okay.
Oh no, summer success. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I just have one question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we were talking about relationships, and I know you were talking also about that sometime a very well-liked or very dynamic instructor could be adverse more than better because, I mean, you didn't finish it, but I'm figuring that you were alluding to that. Then the kids only want that person, and then if anyone else comes, they don't want to have that guy. That's what I'm assuming that you were leading on to that. But
Well, no, not necessarily.
no?
I think as you know, it's only Master Smith, but myself, a lot of us came up as think of ourselves as athletes, and left to our own devices, we're enamored of talent, right? So we'd love to have the, you know, I mean, I'm a Taekwondo / kickboxing background. So, you know, if I don't check myself, I love to have the guy or girl who's kicking vertically and all that stuff, right? But the reality is competitors usually are egocentric and are focused on themselves more so than they're focused on the students. And what I want is a sincere and empathetic teacher, not a tremendous athlete. And MMA schools are more guilty about that. They want the guy who's the, you know, the national champion, the regional champion, or he's a great fighter. Usually they're horrible teachers. What I want is sincere and empathetic. Now, I certainly, as I get bigger, Glenn, I certainly am aware that I don't want to set myself up for there's only the one guy or gal that's the center point of all of their attention. But honestly, I've never had problems with that. I've had, you know, at any one time, 30 instructors that the kids loved and they wanted to come back and they really were excited there. So the charisma I'm talking about isn't so much they're personable. They've got to be personable. I want sincere and interested in the students, but I don't so much care about having the egocentric athlete. They're counterproductive, right? So if I have a teacher who's spending all their time watching themselves in the mirror, they got to go, right? I want a teacher, if they're highly gifted, I want a teacher who's focused on how many students can they get to be better than they are, rather than constantly proving they're the biggest swinging whatever in the school, right? So,
Right.
You know, martial arts is full of egocentric assholes. There's a great book, by the way, called The No Assholes Policy. It's a great way to think about developing your school. Is, you know, you don't fix assholes. You just got to be careful not to hire them and not to tolerate them.
Okay, thank you, sir.
That makes sense?
Yes, sir, sure does.
Okay. Any last question, Joan? I saw you laughing on that one. Hopefully that was on target. Okay, so I would welcome you guys to work with us on marketing for the next 6 weeks and really focus in on that stuff. Again, Bobby, correct me, martialartswealth.com/summer success, or your phone number is 720-256-0208. And with that, we're out of here. Have a great day. Hopefully it's valuable for everybody.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.